Welcome to our Friday night discussion. I am by myself this evening. I will be your host, Geraldine Garwood, and my co-host, Geraldo Budan, is not with me this evening, but he's dealing with the technicalities so that we can be on air this evening. And so we continue with the discussion of crime and violence. And the last time we had with us SSP Stephanie Lindsay, and she gave us a picture of crime and violence from the Jamaican perspective locally, and talk about our government, other things that the governance can do to help to reduce crime and violence, and how the church can incorporate or cooperate with the government to help in reducing crime and violence. And so we learned a lot from her. So this evening we have a special guest with us. Nice to meet you, Mr. Rattigan. Mr. Rattigan came highly recommended by Inspector Colin Johnson. And so it's good to have you tonight on our Friday night discussions. We have been having these Friday night discussions, sir, to look at some hard issues that are facing us as a nation. And so tonight we want to have an international perspective on the whole issue of crime and violence and how it relates to our Jamaican context. And so it's good to have you, sir, Mr. Rattigan, former FBI official local counsel. Am I correct? You're former.
Well,
But he'll tell us a little
yeah,
bit about himself.
yeah,
He's
I'm
residing
retired.
in the US, yes. So he's now residing in the US. And so it's good to have him on our discussion this evening. So before we go right in for Mr. Rattigan to introduce himself, we want to ask that you click that subscription button. So you subscribe to the channel, you like and share. I mean, so that others can join into the discussion for this evening. So, Mr. Rattigan, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Okay, Ms. Garwood, thank you for having me. It's my deep pleasure to be here. Um, I was born in Kingston. Actually, I was born at UC Hospital, as they say, and spent the first few years of my life in the Whitfield Town area, and then moved to Waterhouse when I was about 4 or 5 years old, and moved back and forth because of the political turmoil in Waterhouse. In those days, they used to call it Firehouse back in the 70s. So,
Yeah.
right. And I went to a primary school in Waterhouse called Balmagie Primary School and went to Meadowbrook High School. So going to Meadowbrook, I saw both sides of the coin. I saw how the well-to-do people lived. And then I had to go home at night and had to struggle to even find a meal. Left Jamaica when I was 17 and moved to New York. Wasn't really looking forward to it because I just transferred from Meadowbrook to Wolmer's. But anyway, got to New York, went to college in New York, then went to Howard Law School and worked a bit, then joined the FBI. And I was there for almost 30 years, from 1987 to 2017. And traveled the world, uh, seen a few things, and here I am. I'm practicing law now in the U.S.
So proud of you. And I want you to know that I am presently residing in Whitfield Town. So it's nice to know that you're from Whitfield Town. And I'm
Yeah,
from Whitfield Town.
I used to live a place name, place name What Town, right in front of Lincoln Avenue and Maxwell
I,
Avenue.
I live off Maxwell Avenue. So, yes, I do know that.
Yeah, I used to live at 51 as well.
Right, right, right. So it's good to know that we are both from Whitfield Town, right?
Yes.
And we are proud. We are making Jamaica proud. Just want to delve in. Yeah, big up. Just want to delve in. First question I want to ask you: what kind of training do FBI agents receive? For persons who are on and would like to know, what kind of training do
Well,
FBI agents receive?
yeah, before you even get to the training, you have to be selected, and it's a very grueling process. They 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 really do a thorough background check on you. It could take years
Mhm.
before you're selected. So that's the first thing. They do an outstanding job of selecting agents, keeping in mind that there are only about 13,000, maybe a little bit more now, and they cover the entire globe. Not only the US, but they have offices overseas. Um, and with only 13,000 people, people think that, it's a lot more than that. When I ask people, how many agents do you think? They say, oh, but it's probably a little bit more than, maybe less than 14,000 now. But the training, it's when I went there in 1987, they focused on basically three areas. They focused on firearms, fitness, and something called legal. Legal is where they taught you about the laws, and then they incorporated various aspects of investigations in it. Now, or since I left, they started up a new program, which was the Intel, and that actually came about since 9/11. So you get a piece of that, because for a long time, agents, the organization was started in 1908, and at that time they only accepted accountants and lawyers, and it's changed over the years. But the agents are very, very focused people, and if they have a case, they focus completely on that case. And then after 9/11, things began to change, and we realized that what you're focusing on is probably just a piece of the pie, not everything. And so now they brought analysts in, and they were the ones who were responsible for connecting the cases. And also they would provide guidance to the investigators. The investigators didn't like that, because they said, my case this, I need nobody for come tell me how to investigate. So it was a tough process. So those are the areas that they really focus on: legal, firearms, fitness, and intel. And it's when I went through it, I think it was like 3 months, or a 3-month course, 3 or 4 months. Now I'm being told that it's a bit longer. But they have no hesitation in getting rid of you if you don't meet the grade. I remember when I went on the range for the first time, and at that time I think I had to shoot like a 80 to pass, and we were out in the snow, and I missed the target completely. When I went down there and looked at my target, we had to fire 50 rounds, and I'm lucky if I had like 15 rounds on the target. And because they start from the 5-yard line and they go all the way to I think it's a 25-yard line or 50-yard line. And I said, man, I'm not gonna make it through this course. And the guy said, no, don't worry. By the time we're done with you, you'll be fine. And he was correct. So yeah, but in terms of the training, it's very focused. In fact, what they do is they try to keep you. And I don't know if it's still the same, but when I went through, for the first several weeks, you weren't allowed to leave the academy on the weekends, because they wanted to make sure that you were completely focused on the task at hand, which was to graduate and get assigned.
Sounds like rigorous training. Sounds very rigorous.
Yeah,
For 3 months, and I can understand why they may extend it to a little bit longer, because it sounds like it was a rigorous training, but an effective and if one, I presume, so that you can be adequately prepared to do what your role requires.
indeed. And I must say that for me, it was a blessing, because I was actually making more money by joining the FBI. I was working with an agency in New York City, as a lawyer, and the money was okay. But when I went to the FBI, I actually received an increase. For a lot of people, though, interestingly, it was the opposite. I can remember there's one guy in my class. He left a job back in 1987, paying him $150,000, which was a ton of money back then. This guy was driving a Ferrari at the time, and he gave that up to come work for the FBI for $32,000. And I asked him why, and he said, because it's always a dream of mine to be an agent. So you find people who are there; they're not coming there because they're looking for a job. They're coming there because they felt driven. Like, this is my purpose in life, to be an FBI agent. They're aspiring to do that, and that's also because of the brand. And we'll talk about the JCF later on in the conversation. But the brand, they go through great lengths to make sure that that brand is protected. And if you God forbid you should do something that runs afoul of any regulation or law or something like that. I mean, they don't hesitate in making object lessons out of people.
Wow. Food for thought. What is the role of the FBI in solving crime?
Well, it's a good question, but it's also a question that would require far more time than you and I have. But essentially, they investigate federal crimes, and we have more than 200 of them. Some of them they're kind of silly, if you ask me. One called the Migratory Bird Act, like certain birds are protected species, and if you're except for the eagle, but certain birds, if you're caught trapping, killing, whatever, then you face you face serious federal penalties. So they have more than 200 federal violations that they investigate, but they also help with local crimes. They realize that, especially after 9/11, that you can't do a lot without creating and developing partnerships with local law enforcement. So you'll find that they have a lot of task forces, safe street task forces, gangs task forces, and that's to help and supplement the locals. Because if you think about it, the FBI doesn't really have jurisdiction in some of those cases. Like, for example, a murder, right? A murder in New York, the FBI really has no jurisdiction. So local crime, there has to be like a federal nexus to it. And however, the locals can say, hey, FBI, I need you to come in with your expertise and help me to address this issue. And they willingly join forces with them all the time. So in terms of solving crime itself, crime that they are responsible for investigating, it's based on a model called intelligence-driven investigations. And it's a term that you hear bandied about, but a lot of people, they really don't know what it means, or they read something somewhere. But it's a very involved process where, as I alluded to earlier, you get the investigator, you get the analyst, and you also get sources involved, whether it's human sources or signal sources, meaning telephone taps or whatever. And then you have somebody who's sitting there and putting all of this, looking at the mix and making something out of it that they can provide to the investigator to say, okay, here's your target and here's what you need to do. So intelligence driven investigations means that you're no longer in the reactive stage, meaning you're not waiting for something to happen and then you respond. You're in the proactive state. And where the FBI is headed, and in some cases it's there already, it's in the predictive stage, where you can take all of this information, the data, you can take the source information, from wherever you're getting this information, and you have these analysts who just sit there. I mean, they're an integral part of this, and they sit there and they can actually predict where crime will take place. I mean, I worked with a guy out in Mississippi, deputy chief of police. He was in charge of the intel unit, and it was amazing to watch him work. He and his group, they could tell you that based on the data, based on source information, that two people or there'll be a shooting at this location next week Friday night, and
Wow.
and that allowed them to mobilize their forces and then go there. So they were actually preventing crime from happening.
So that's a preventative approach. But I
Right.
mean, what are some of the strategies? What are some of the intellectual, what I would thinking that would give them those inclination that a crime will take place here? Is it something that is it that the area lends itself to the crime riddled or so? What could be a key, I mean,
there's
clue for them to make that prediction? That's
there-
interesting.
there's several keys. One of them is history. So what they'll do is they'll go back and they'll look at the history of a particular area. Second thing, another key is source information. I mean, you have to be able to protect people and information. If you can't do that, then this is not going to work, right? And so, with all of that, they're able to look at what happened in the past. They're able to look at what they're hearing now. And if they have a wiretap going, or some other signal. It's called signals. Invest. Uh, I'm searching for the word right now, but what they do is it's like a mix, and they get all this stuff together, and these people are, I mean, are extremely talented, and then they sit there and they go through this stuff. They look at people, they look at events, they look at information, and they're able to tell you that, look, something is going to happen next weekend, and it's going to be at this particular place. So we need to get our sources, we need to get our forces out there to prevent these things from happening. Um, it's difficult for me to explain to you, but for me, I know I've seen it because I've actually been a part of it. But one of these days, maybe you and I can sit down and I'll just lay everything out to you, and then you'll be able to see. But I hope your visitors get a sense that it's more than just guesswork. It's not guesswork. It's hard work, and it depends a lot on human intelligence sources, what people are telling you, and if you can vet that information, because in Jamaica and elsewhere, not just Jamaica, people tend to um, use intelligence and information interchangeably, and they're not the same thing. They're different things.
Well, I learned that today. I learned that this evening. They are not the same thing. They are different things. Thanks for that. When we look now at Jamaica, how do you think criminal activities in Jamaica is linked to crime internationally?
Okay, so it's a good question, and I have to really think about this one. But let's just say that um, Jamaica doesn't have a gun manufacturing industry. Let's go with gun because that's the topic of the day, right? Yet guns are all over Jamaica. So obviously they're being shipped in. That's the transnational aspect of it. Question is, how are they being shipped in? By whom? When? Why? How? All of that. You have to ask yourself the question. Well, start with the premise that Jamaica is a little over 4,000 square miles. But the territorial waters that Jamaica has to protect is 90,000 square miles. And Jamaica doesn't have a well equipped Coast Guard, doesn't have a Navy, right? And so you said to yourself, well, how are they going to protect their borders? Then, on top of that, you layer that with the fact that the government has identified at least 140 illegal points of entry. So that's 140 places in Jamaica where people can actually come in without the authorities even knowing about it. And
Wow.
then you talk about the seaports and the airports, right? So you have a lot of ground to cover. And you have Haiti that's next door. You have, and they're claiming that guns are being shipped from America to the US, or most of them. I don't buy that. What I do buy is that most of the guns coming into Jamaica, they're manufactured in America. But the idea that most of them are coming, I've yet to see any empirical study showing that it's coming. And the question is, if you know that they're coming from America, what are you doing to prevent it? Because in intelligence, at its base level, there are three things to think about. If you're looking at a person or an organization or an issue, you say, what do I know about it? And then you put that down. Then you say, what don't I know about it? Because you hear them say, people don't know what them don't know. No, people do know what them don't know, right? And then you go from that and say, okay, what am I going to do about it? That's base intelligence. And Jamaica, to me, this is just my personal opinion, it's failed in its mission to address transnational organized crime. Also, add to that the fact that they're saying that they estimate that 200 guns are being shipped illegally to Jamaica every month. That's 2,400 guns. So
Wow.
they found well, they last year, what did they recover? They recover, I think, 700, right? So what about the rest? And this is an ongoing process. So they found, I think, 18 today or 22 or something like that. But keep in mind that every month 200 are actually coming into the country.
Yes, that is 200 times 12.
There you go.
Yeah.
Herein lies the problem. So it's you have to have the political will. then you have to have the skill. You have to have the people, and then you have to have the resources to deal with it. And Jamaica is not in a position to deal with its transnational organized crime issues right now. I mean, they're making seizures of weapons, and people are going ray 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 ray. But to me, that's what they're supposed to do. That's their job. I mean, when you come up with a slogan like "Let's get the guns" or "Let's get illegal guns" or whatever, that's what they're supposed to do. That's what policemen are supposed to do. But then take it a step further. You give a constable 70,000 Jamaican dollars a month, right? They just get a 4% raise, which make it, I think, that's what, 2,800. So a constable is making 72,800, which is about $150, 150 US dollars, right? By contrast, the police commissioner is making $13.5 million in salary. Plus, he gets another 4.3 for in benefits. And then you turn around and then you say, somebody came up with this ridiculous solution to the crime problem by saying we're going to buy back the guns. And they're going to start buying back the guns at $250,000. So now you're empowering the criminals. You're paying a criminal to continue to be a criminal, because a criminal bringing out a rusty gun, you give him $250,000, right? Now we can buy 2 brand new guns and have $50,000 left in his pocket. And you still tell the guy making $72,000 a year, go chase him. No, he's not only chasing a guy he used to chase a guy with a rusty gun. Now you're telling him to go chase a guy with 2 new guns. Does that make sense? It doesn't make sense.
It
And
doesn't make sense at all.
and
It
then
doesn't make sense at all.
yeah,
Wow.
then they come up with the idea that, oh, we're going to increase the penalty, we're going to do this. And if people would just read, it's called the Firearms Act of 1967, and it's been amended several times. I think the last time they amended it was in 2010. Section 24 tells you that if someone is caught with a firearm with intent to use to kill someone or whatever, the penalty in the circuit court is life. So when you tell people, oh, we're going to give them life, they already are exposed to life. So you have to ask yourself what kind of games are being played. And I must take time out to tell you about a program. I like this program. I read about it, I heard about it, but there's also one in Waterhouse right now where every week the host brings on people from the neighborhood, and then they talk about things that are affecting them. And it's a kind of an outreach program also to reach out to the politician. I hope and pray that the program will be transplanted all across the nation, similar to your program. But we need to talk about these issues, because if we just keep quiet, the only people who are going to really die is just us, you know.
That is so true. You have given us food for thought there. When you talk about the salary of the constable compared to the salary of the commissioner,
Mm-hmm.
and the whole ideology of buying back the guns, of course, you are correct in saying then that we are making the criminals even more criminals, right?
Exactly.
You're really
Exactly.
correct. That analogy is really, really is really, really true. And that leads me to a question I'm going to jump ahead to, because I am wondering, why law enforcement officers get involved in corruption and corrupt activities. But having heard this salary, it's no excuse, then I'm beginning to think that, this gives some rationale as to why they may get involved in corruption. It's
Let me
not the right thing to do, but then if you are giving somebody $72,000, 72,000 Jamaican dollars for salary, and the person has a family paying rent, some paying mortgage, some probably have a little vehicle paying that. When you calculate that, what do they have to go home with? And so somebody may say, but they should not live above their means, and that may be true. But then it shows why it is easy then for them to get involved in corrupt activity. Could you speak to that?
oh, good. Good. Uh, the FBI, they have like four guiding principles when they come up with their strategies. They have four guiding principles. The first one, people. Very first one, people, because they said, look, no matter how much technology you have, no matter how many strategies you have, if you don't have the right people, it those things will not work. So what they do, they invest in human capital, right? They make sure that you are you are well compensated, and that's why they make an object lesson out of you when you go astray, right? They make sure that you have the resources. I have policemen calling me for resources from Jamaica, right? And I'm going, well, what about the 300 plus million that Minister Chang said he had to spend by the end of this year? What about that money, right? No, no answer. But it goes back to who do you recruit, right? And if you don't have a good recruitment process, and you get the wrong people in, they're not going to change and suddenly become good people. That's the first thing. Then you have peer pressure. You have a guy, you have a new recruit who's trying to do the right thing on the street, but he's mentored by an older cop who, for all intents and purposes, as far susceptible to corruption. And so this young officer now, he has no choice. He has to go along to get along. Plus, as you mentioned, if he has a family, I mean, how is he going to survive? I mean, think about it. That's the first thing they should be doing, increasing the wages for policemen. Not just policemen, but civil servants across the board, nurses, teachers, right? You expect those people to raise a generation, right? Or raise generations of Jamaicans to achieve. Yet still you don't give them the tools. You don't give them the salary. You don't give them any incentive to go above and beyond. When I was in school, there were teachers who they stayed behind and they did extra lessons free of cost. Free of cost. Because they felt like I'm doing this for my country, I'm doing this for my nation, I'm doing this because these children they need the extra attention. Nowadays you know everybody throw their hands up in the air, and I have a lot of friends who are policemen, and I can tell you that one policeman told me something. He said, we've lost he said we've lost the battles and we're losing the war, right? When they have to work, when you have policemen working 14 hours a day, 16 hours a day, 6 days a week, right? And he's exposed to all kinds of atrocities. At some point when he goes home, and you probably know more about this better than most people, he's gonna go home, he's gonna take it out on his family, right?
That's true. That's true.
And we don't have the mental health capacity to take care of these people. We need to take better care of our policemen. We need to take better care of them. Now, you do have some bad apples, but I've said before, and I'll say it again, the overwhelming majority of the people of the JCF are good, hardworking public servants who want to do the right thing and are doing the right thing. And they get a bad name because of a few bad apples. And what they don't realize, what the leadership doesn't realize is that a few people can spoil your brand. A few people can spoil your brand. And when you give somebody 72,000 Jamaican dollars, 150 US dollars, and say, okay. Oh, by the way, I don't know if you know about this, but they don't even have enough weapons for everyone to go home with a weapon. So you'll have a policeman patrolling, right? And everybody knows who he is. And then when his shift is over and it's time for him to go home, he has to leave the weapon at the station. So he goes home without any protection.
But
Well,
why is that?
oh,
Is
you
it
know,
is it lack of resources?
I don't
So
think it's
could you is it saying then that, but it sounds like the criminals have more weapons than the officers.
there you go. There you go. There you go. And it shouldn't be. That shouldn't
It
be.
shouldn't
Right?
be.
No, you cannot tell me that you have a force of what, 10,000 people, and you cannot equip them so that when they're off duty, they can protect themselves. You have money to do all kinds of things, but you can't find money. You can't find money. Well, you know, don't get me started up because I can also talk about the rural reach situation with this Ministry of Education, where it's alleged that,
Yes.
yeah, that he misappropriated funds to the tune of millions. And then you look at students who coming out of school who can't even read, and you wonder why. I don't wonder why. I don't. And it's similarly when you look at a policeman and you give him $72,000, and then you tell him, okay, you have a family of 3 or 4, and we expect you to feed them, care for them, nurture them, and also to come to work on time and do what you're supposed to do and do it with pride. It won't work. It won't work.
I agree, and it has serious psychological implications on the officer when they have to work for so many hours. They are sleep deprived. Some of them, I mean, they even for the special zones of operation. Many times I've seen some of them just give away the food. They say the food is not prepared properly, so they don't even eat the food that they get because the food is not of quality that they receive even while on the job there. I mean, stationed there, at that particular area. So I know the psychological effect of that is severe on the family. And it lends me to think, you were talking and I was thinking about that police officer that left the child, his child in the vehicle, you
Hmm.
know. And it is alleged that he was rushing for work. He had a special operation, and somehow when he remembered that he actually had the child in the vehicle of the child, when he went back, we heard the fatality. And so it leads us to wonder. I mean, the pressure that they may be under, and then they have become so conditioned, you know, to this kind of lifestyle that I mean, they are not even thinking of their own, because you do have some of them that really, really put the job at the forefront of everything else. And all
Mhm.
they're thinking about is the job, the job, the job. And don't even remember that they have their family to really think about. So there is that psychological pressure on the officers to function on the job, and
Mhm.
many of them are not functioning effectively because they are sleep deprived. They may not be eating properly, and they just need to breathe, and there's no time to breathe. And they are out there, and while out there too, some of them are still on the job, but they're on the job even in fear for their lives, because they know that sometimes when they come up against these hardcore criminals, they may not have the weapons to fight them.
Mhm.
And then some of them literally are seeing death staring in their face, and they're thinking about their family. So we can see the stress of it all, on them. And that lends me to ask then, what are some of the strategies that the government should put in place, I mean, to make police officers more comfortable on the job? We have talked about increase of salary, but what else can be done for them?
Well, they could always do the retraining. I mean, the FBI is constantly training people. I mean, you have emerging threats, you have present threats, and so they don't leave it to guesswork. You're constantly going through training and retraining. Um, the idea that you're gonna give somebody a salary and you expect them to go out and perform the job to the best of their ability, it speaks to how do you care for such a person. And when you and I hate to go back to, well, no, I don't hate to go back to it. Let me go back to it. $17.8 million. That's what the police commissioner is getting every year. He's the highest paid police commissioner ever in the JCF. 17 point. Look at the disparity. And then he's not out there fighting crime. He's not out there fighting crime. The guy whose life is on the line is getting $72,000. Right? Something is wrong right there. When you have police stations that people in the diaspora have to send money and try or adopt a police station, or the US government has to help to build a police station, you say to yourself, no man, this has gone from bad to worse. When you have policemen still writing that big old book, you know, as opposed to getting in the 21st century and start blogging on and putting things in. Yeah, and you know how it go. If for the right price, things will disappear out of that book. I mean, it's not an indictment of the police. It's just a fact that we're using prehistoric methods to deal with crime in the 21st century. Don't even get me started about cyber. I mean, they can't deal with it. because the criminals are way ahead. And the other thing too is that you have a lot of criminals in prison right now, and they're getting schooled on cyber. When the Jamaicans get deported and they come back to Jamaica, I predict that they're going to have an even bigger problem, because the banks are losing money hand over fist in Jamaica, but they're also making handsome profits. So you don't hear them talk about the losses that are occurring. But at some point in time, it's going to come to the fore. The police are just not equipped to deal with this. And every now and again, you get some politician making some ridiculous statement saying that the Jamaican police are the best in the northern hemisphere, or in North America. You hear this nonsense, and it's not even laughable. You just have to just ignore it. As my mother used to say, ignore ignorance, because they don't know what they're talking about. They really don't. I've been preaching for years that they should get a task force. Now they have one to look at guns, criminals, and gangs. This should have been done a long time ago. This should have been done a long time ago. Look how many lives we've lost. And I'd say needlessly, but it's for lack of vision. You know, the FBI's vision statement is ahead of the threat. We don't wait for things to happen. We prevent things from happening.
Proactive, but we are more reactive.
Exactly. It
Right.
was created in that format, and today it's still there. They tinker around the edges of things that they do. They tinker with it, but by and large, it's still reactive. Something has to happen, and then they show up. You know,
What are your views on the lot of scamming? I mean, in relation to crime now, that is one of the major um, issue that contributes to crime and reprisal killing, especially in the West, Montego Bay,
right.
that side. I mean, what are your views on that?
Well, lot of scamming. I worked lot of scamming up in Ottawa, Canada, out of the embassy back in 19. What was it? 1980. No, sorry, 1998. Um, I forgot the term they used. They didn't call it lotto scamming. There's another term that they use for it, but it was the same thing where somebody call you up and say you've won X amount of dollars and send me some money, to pay for the taxes or whatever. It escapes me now. I can't. I'll remember it. And in fact, the Homeland Security, they're spearheading the movement in Jamaica to eradicate the scourge of lotto scamming. And I actually went to a meeting in Washington. I actually voted to continue the program for Homeland Security to be financially supported to assist with the JCF to deal with the lotto scamming. Um, the lotto scamming is that's a tough one, and I'll tell you why it's a tough one. There are things that they can do, and there are things that they're doing, and they're making a dent. But, and I'm not going to blame the victim, but I used to tell my squad that, look, when somebody calls you up and they tell you that, oh, they've been scammed, you ask them, did you enter a lottery competition? Did you buy a lottery ticket or something like that? And if the answer is no, then the question is, well, why did you think you won something when you didn't enter anything? Um, it still doesn't take away from the fact that you have victims and you have to address that. Now, going back to the $72,000 constable, yeah, yeah, you hear stories about and you hear stories about police being involved in scamming, right? And you want to believe it, but I mean, you want to disbelieve it, but those stories are borne out by the fact that people are actually arrested. They just arrested a police woman the other day, and they arrested a bunch of them involved in this lot of
Yes,
scamming.
yes, yes.
And because at the end of the day, it's a way to eke out a living. Here's something else that should be done in Jamaica that I don't think is being done. When I was in the FBI, we had to do 2 financial disclosure statements every year. That means every year, twice, I had to tell them what financially what I owned, who I owed, how was I paying, making the payments, why did I take the money from them. And there was one that was very simple. It asked about your investments, but there was one that they would give you advance. They would tell you like back in like December, saying that, hey, this thing is due in April, because that one was very, very intrusive. It asked about your family, where did they get their money from, your bank accounts, your investments, your loans, ask about everything. So what would happen is that, and they had a threshold. So if you crossed over that threshold based on your submissions, you would get called in. Like, for example, if you're living in a house that costs $1 million, you'd have to explain where did that money come from. I have a friend who, he was my first FBI partner, and he retired and he became a contractor. And his wife came from a very, very wealthy family. They bought a place and they paid cash for it. It was like $1 million. He got called in. You can just imagine it. They call you into this room and you have the light over your head and you have two guys in front of you and you sit down. And it's a team, where did this money come from? Because the money that you're earning from us, it's not enough for you to afford this house. And you have to sit there and have to explain to them. These are things that they do to ferret out bad behavior, to ferret out illegality, ill-gotten gains. The JCF doesn't do that. I've heard many, many stories, I'm sure you have too, of policemen who, on a meager salary, they end up owning taxis. They live in big houses. They take vacations.
And buses, and they own buses too, and they own like two taxis, and they have two taxis on the road. I've heard the stories too, and have buses.
There you go.
And $72,000.
Right.
The farmer 70,000, not the increase.
So it's this the scamming thing. As long as there is a way to make money in Jamaica, rest assured. Well, as long as there's a way to make money illegally in Jamaica, and as long as you keep paying them $72,800, that's what's going to happen. So we shouldn't be surprised. We should not be surprised when we hear that policemen are involved in all kinds of illegality.
Let me ask this question though. Why do you think that policemen are paid at such a low rate? Why is the salary so low? I want to ask this question one. And I know in the past, to get in the police force, you didn't need to have like subjects. I know they have stepped up that now. So initially, years ago, you didn't need to have like CXCs or GCs. Now persons are entering the force with bachelor's degrees, and some have gone on to do their masters. Are there increments, or when somebody enter with have achieved a master's or have gained a bachelor's, do they get an increase? But why overall law enforcement officers' salary are at that scale?
Well, let's take the FBI for example. I went in with a law degree, and I got the same salary as the guy who came in with a PhD, right? Or the guy who came in with just a bachelor's. You have to have a minimum of bachelor's, right? But they start you out at the same salary. And getting an education, it doesn't really affect your upward mobility in the organization. What affects or enhances your upward mobility? Your performance. And how do they judge performance? Every 90 days, you are required to sit with your supervisor. You bring all your files in, 10, 20, whatever the number is. And he's going to go through every single one of them with you. And then on a piece of paper, he's going to tell you, you need to do this, he's going to discuss the cases with you, tell you what you need to do, give you advice, right? And then you're done. 90 days later, you're back again to see him and tell you what, you better not have a situation where something he told you to do didn't get done and you don't have a good excuse. Because there's going to be a problem. There's going to be a problem. So they hold your feet to the fire. They have high standards. Another thing that they do is they say, okay, you must have sources. You must have people giving you information. You must. That's the bread and butter of law enforcement. Law enforcement by itself, they can't do anything. They need people to tell them what's going on because they themselves, they don't know the streets. And when you have a source, that source must be productive. So you can't just have a source just for the books to say, well, I have one. No, they're going to say, let's look at the source file and see what he's been giving you. And if he's not giving you good information, they say, you got to close him. You got to go find another source, right? They don't have those measures in the JCF. And you find that it's just as a term, yeah, to use this term, but loosey goosey. It's like people just do things in general. In general, some areas of the JCF, you have a strategy, you have priorities, you have your goals, and those areas are being well run. But overall, it's in a state of dysfunctionality. It's dysfunctional overall. Um, you know, uh, and that's because you have leaders who are not leaders. You have leaders who are not even managers. You have leaders in name only. Because if you ask an FBI agent, any FBI agent, what are the priorities of the FBI? They'll be able to rattle it off like that. If you ask them about the organization, they'll be able to rattle things off. Ask a policeman, what are the goals and objectives of the JCF? Ask him, what are the priorities of the JCF?
They don't know.
No, because it never filtered down, right? And that's leadership. You know, um, they say that a good leader doesn't create followers; he create new leaders. And what you have at the high command, and I'm a vocal critic because I think that concept, that construct is outdated. And like I said before, if I were the police commissioner, I'd get rid of all of them. I'd only have like maybe two or three people up there with me because what I would do is I'd split the country in three. It already has demarcation lines: Cornwall, Middlesex, Surrey. And what I would do is I put one person in charge of each county. And every morning at 8 o'clock, that person would have to report to me. You'd have to tell me what happened in the last 24 hours and what you are going to do in the next 24 hours. And any day I can tell you what's going on in your county, that's the day I don't need you. I get somebody to replace you. Because if I know more than you and you're supposed to be in charge of this county, then I don't need you.
Excellent point. That's true. That's a good strategy of giving them.
Yeah.
Very
And
good one.
you hold people's feet to the fire because here's what happened in the FBI, and I learned this the hard way, but it was a good lesson. Two things. One is you never give up your people. You never give up your people. If an operation went awry, something just didn't go as planned, you take it. And the second thing is you either knew about something and you didn't do anything about it, or you should have known because you're the leader. So either way, you can't show up and say, well, it wasn't me, it was John. And they say, well, who does John work for? Works for me. So by extension, you're the problem, not John. As far as we're concerned here, you're the problem. When you leave, you can go fix John's business. But right now, you're the problem. And we don't hold people that accountable in Jamaica. We don't. We have the fat cat sitting up at the high command, and they're pretending that they're providing guidance and all this stuff, and it's just pure nonsense. Think about this think about this for a second. The present commissioner was the chief of staff for the JDF. The prime minister plucked him from that position and said, "I'm going to make you my first national security at the first the first national security advisor in Jamaica." The first, right? Now at that level, you're at the 30,000 foot level. So you're that intelligence czar. So you see everything that's going on with customs, with the police, with JDF, with tourism, all the threats. You see what's going on. Threats that not only present, but emerging threats that could affect Jamaica, right? And then he had him there for a while, and then he moved him to become police commissioner. So right away, the first question is, who are you telling me that the national security issue has been addressed? Because you haven't replaced him. You've repositioned him. So who's taking over that position now, right? And then you put this man in this position, and I've never met him personally, but I've attended one of his town hall meetings. I attended it in Florida. He's a likable guy. He's a grandfatherly figure. In fact, the day when he was at the town hall meeting, he said his first grandchild was born. But the man is an absolute nincompoop when it comes to fighting crime. That's not his mission. That's not his history. That's not his culture. That's not his training. Right? Taking that would be like taking a plumber and say, I want to make you a dentist today. So we need you to go pull some teeth. You can just imagine what that situation would be like. And that's why you're getting all this stuff. And then he surrounded himself with more nincompoops. And so that's why we're in a state where we are today. There is no vision. Remember what I said the FBI vision was? Ahead of the threat. Right? Which means that you're going to be proactive and you're going to try to be predictive. The JCS motto is serve, protect, and reassure. Ask anybody if they feel reassured by the police. Because
we're getting less of that in terms of persons feeling reassured. I mean, that is so true. A lot of persons are not having that confidence in the police.
No, because not only must you have the stats to say crime is going down, and we can play with stats. Everybody knows that, right? If you do a basic statistical course, you know that we can play with stats. But let's say that the stats are correct, right? You must not only have the correct stats showing that crime is trending down, but people must feel as if they're safe and secure. Ask anybody in Jamaica if they feel safe and secure. Ask anybody from the man on the top of the hill to the man in the inner city. Nobody no feel secure. So what kind of society is that? And what role do you think the police, like you ask a question, what role should the police play, right? What role does the FBI play in solving crime? Well, the question is, what role does the JCF play in solving crime? Do you know that if you commit murder in Jamaica, you stand, the last statistic I heard, you stand like a 95% chance of getting away with it if you go to trial? Because they're going to kill the witnesses. Or, something going to happen with the police testimony. I mean, look at the Klansman trial. You remember the incident where the Sykes, the Chief Justice, when he asked the police forensic person for some of the evidence, and she said she don't know it there.
Can't find it. Can't find it.
Yeah, where is the chain of command? And see, that's what I mean.
There's the accountability.
Yeah, where's the chain of evidence? And that's why I'm saying to you that I would hold the police commissioner responsible for that, because a case like this, and I mean, he was in Florida bragging about this case, saying that they're arresting these people and they're going to come to trial. So he's been briefed on this. So if I were in his position, I'd want to be briefed on every aspect of that case, including the evidence to be presented in court. But that's what I said to you. When you use a plumber for the dentistry work, this is what you're going to get. I mean, no disrespect to him, but the facts will bear me out.
That's fine. I mean, these are hard issues we're discussing, so we have to discuss them hard.
I'm not afraid to talk my mind. I'm not afraid to talk my mind. They call it as we see it.
Right. We are almost running out of time, but I want to ask you about undercover work. Do you see that as something that can be effective? I know the FBI sometimes engage in that. Do you think that can be effective in our Jamaican context through the JCF?
Yes. Similar to the way you develop a robust source base, you can, or they should develop an undercover program. I've worked undercover, and there is a science to it. You just don't tell somebody, say, okay, tomorrow you're going to be John Brown, and you do it. I had to go to school to learn this, right? And it's very, very effective because, like I said to you before, you can have all the technology. The best way of getting information, I think, is to have somebody who's actually in with the bad guys, who can tell you what their motives are, what their mode of communication, transportation, what their intent, all of these things they can tell you. And then you can use the technology to focus where you should focus. But otherwise, you're just gonna be willy-nilly all over the place. Undercover work, I I fully support it, fully support it, and I have some stories I can tell you. But
Do you think it can work in Jamaica though? Do you think it can work through the JCF? I
given
always wonder, can it work?
well, given under this JCF, the way it's presently structured and the leadership, it's questionable. It's very, very questionable because again, like I said, we don't know and I say we because I'm Jamaican. They don't know how to. We don't know how to protect people, and we don't know how to protect information. And how many times have you heard somebody go to the police station and report somebody, and by the time they get back to the neighborhood, the word already come back say John Brown
It's
did.
them. Yes,
They
yes,
don't
yes.
know how to do that. But so that's what I'm saying. There's a way to do it, and believe me, I, I've been in countries far worse than Jamaica, far worse than Jamaica. And I've seen countries that were like Jamaica, and suddenly there was a reformation. They started putting things in place. These people became serious about fighting crime, and there was a turnaround. You cannot eliminate crime, but you can control it to the point where people feel safe, right? And at least they should be trying to do that. But I won't give somebody credit for doing their job. So when they tell me they seized 20 guns, okay, fine. You tell me that you have 200 coming in illegally every month. That's 20. So you still have 180 you have to account for, right? So doing your job, when you start applauding people for doing their job like this, it tells you that things are in a bad state. It tells you that they weren't doing anything before. And now anything is applaudable. Anything that they do now, you say, yeah, them other them job. So going back to your question about whether or not the undercover program can work, it can work, but it's going to take some doing. You're gonna have to have the select the right people. You're gonna have to have what's critical is you're gonna have to have instructors, people who have actually done this kind of work, because this is not for the faint of heart. I mean, people will lose their lives doing this kind of stuff, um, because you're asked to be somebody who you're not. And if you're asked to play a certain role, you're asked to be an actor or an actress, and the school actually it acts as a sieve in the sense that it will say, no, this person is not right for this assignment. Because when you come to the class, for the most part, most of these guys, they're involved in undercover operations, and they will tell you that no, you're not right for it. Another thing that they do is they check on you. They check on you. Like I was totally undercover. I had a different name, different identity, everything. And what they do is the psychologist, they would meet with you in a safe house every 6 months or every 3 months or whatever, just to make sure that this will work, that you don't cross over the other side. Because far too often, if them leave you long enough inside here, you start acting and behaving
Like the other person.
exactly like a bad guy.
Wow. Yes, yes, yes.
And
So
so
you
they
take on that personality and actually become that person.
exactly, exactly. I remember I was working undercover for on this case, and the guy who was a case agent, the guy who had overall control of the case, he would actually take me to church every Sunday with him. He would actually say, "Get away from these guys and find a way out, and then come and then we'll go to church, and then we just live a normal life for Sunday." Because Monday I'm back to the old grind. I'm back to being that person. And far too often you have FBI agents who they work undercover for a long time and they didn't get the psychological support that they needed. And when the operation was over, they ended up doing the same things. They ended up committing crimes. And I'm telling you, it's very intoxicating because when you start hanging out with bad guys and you start doing things and all that stuff, if you don't get the attention that you need, you're gonna walk away with that personality. Some modicum of it is gonna remain inside of you because you can't live that life of illegality for 3, 4, 5 years. And by the way, the FBI, they don't do undercover operations for 2 months. When they put you in, and that's it. And you really have no connection to the office or anything like that. Everything is just done somewhere else. you know so it can work in Jamaica, but you're gonna have to have a program, and you're gonna have to have the right instructors, and you're going to have the right people. And then also you're going to have a focus. You're going to say, okay, we're training these undercover agents to do what? What are we training you to do? You know, like one time I was requested to work undercover with some guys, some bad guys, and then these bad guys rode bikes. So they said, okay, you know what? We're gonna send you to a bike school so you can learn to ride bike too, so that you can mesh with these people. So you know, it can work, but it's just gonna take the will. It's gonna take some resources, and it's going to take more than $72,800.
Mr. Rattigan, I want to thank you for sharing us this evening. Boy, you have given us food for thought. We have looked at crime from the legal perspective. We have had our own SSP, Stephanie Lindsay. I mean, speaking on the issue of crime and violence in Jamaica, and how the church can assist, in helping the police to solve crime as well as other Jamaican citizens. And we have heard about crime and violence from an international perspective from our FBI, Mr. Rattigan. Thank you for joining us this evening. I am sure that our audience have learned a lot. And I can tell you that this video is going to go viral, especially the 13, the million salary there, that salary there that you spoke about, persons are going to run with it, right? Compared to that $72,000, and I just want to say that, we still want to hail and applaud those of our police officers who are doing the right thing. We want to, applaud them. And, it is our hope that our governance will get a vision so that they can plan effectively and put the relevant resources in place so that we can control crime and violence in Jamaica. Because it is one of our pandemic, crime and violence. We are dealing with the COVID, but trust me, COVID is not my problem. The crime and violence is my main concern for this nation. Yes, we are dealing with the coronavirus, and but the crime, so many persons are dying. There's no respect for life. The elderly, our children, I mean, innocent persons, because you come from a particular community, or because your family has done something and they can't get a family. So we need to have better strategies in place to fight this monster of crime and violence. So I want to thank you again, Mr. Rattigan, for sharing with us this evening. And I'm sure we're going to get him back on our program to talk some more again. I mean, as you have given us food for thought, and we have learned a lot from you this evening. So
Well,
thank you again for joining me this evening.
well, Miss Carol, it's been my pleasure um, uh, to
I'm
be with
proud of
you.
you, Whitfield Town. So Whitfield
Yes.
Town, we're boasting this evening. We are both from Whitfield Town, and I'm so proud of you. I
No,
mean, you're joining me.
no. It's my pleasure and privilege to be with you. And if I can be of assistance or help, and I've said it many, many times before, I would gladly help the government of Jamaica because of the people of Jamaica. And I would do it for free because I'm retired and I'm practicing law right now. So you wouldn't have to worry about me putting my hand in the till, because, yeah, no, because
Because you're good.
yeah,
You
I'm
know,
making more than 70 what, 72,800. So they don't have to worry about me. I would take care of the 72,800 people, people, or 72,800. I would make that a priority, you know. Like I said, you have to invest in your people. And I just want to applaud you for doing a tremendous service to the country, bringing out programs like this where people have a forum that they can express their thoughts. And hopefully the decision makers are listening, and even more hopefully, they'll take decisive action to address this issue, this scourge of crime and violence. Thank you for having me.